Archazia's Island Set Championship season is already underway, and for those wanting to get their hands on the Hiro Hamada Armor Designer Top 8 card or even the first place playmat, we've got you covered. In this video, we're going to go over 7 decks that we think will give you a great shot at winning, or even give you some inspiration when it comes to what to play. These will be bite-sized deck profiles, introducing the deck's core strengths and weaknesses. We'll also give a rundown of the strategy and key cards when playing, as well as highlighting some other cards you could add depending what you expect at your local set championships. We'll even give you suggestions on how to make these decks more budget friendly too. So let's jump right in. We're starting off today with one of the strongest decks in the current format, Amethyst Steel. Amethyst Steel has been improving each set, getting a steady stream of new, powerful cards. And like many other of the Amethyst lists we'll look at today, it's a deck that takes full advantage of the formidable new illusion cards. The core playstyle of Amethyst Steel hasn't changed all too much, still playing mostly as a mid-range deck that combines the card draw of Amethyst along with the efficient removal of steel. Overstated characters help make favourable trades, which most of the ink combinations can't keep up with. Lore gaining characters help close the game if you lose board control. Together, this pairing allows you to remove opponent threats whilst rushing to 20 lore. Play Amethyst Steel if you prefer mid-range decks where the focus is on going fast to beat control decks and controlling aggro decks. Amethyst card draw helps with consistency, as you're able to cycle through your deck quickly to find the answers you need. Amethyst Steel also benefits from being quite linear in terms of its playstyle, but flexible and highly rewarding of skill play. But it does have a weaker late game than some other Amethyst pairings, and can be difficult to come back if you have a bad start. The core of Amethyst Steel is a well-oiled machine at this point, developed over multiple sets. Amethyst has access to 3 one-cost characters that are designed to replace themselves and apply constant pressure to your opponent. Diablo represents guaranteed card draw in most cases, and can be combined with another staple, Merlin Crab, to both make positive trades into your opponent's characters while also drawing a card to replace itself. In the 2-cost slot, this deck runs 3 of the most powerful 2-cost characters in the game. Mr. Smee is a powerhouse in any deck running steel, and his 3 strength often mean your opponent is forced to make negative trades. Calhoun is a great defensive option that can slow down opposing aggression. And rounding us off is Madam Mim Snake, another overstated character who is a great play on turn 2, but later on in the game, her ability can be used to gain repeated use of your character's on-play abilities. Pete is a prime target for Mim's ability. With this deck, you want your opponent to be making negative trades, but actions can negate that game plan. Pete, however, stops that counterplay in its tracks. Look to protect Pete with Madam Mim Fox and Snake, so you can play him over and over again. Other characters you'll want to protect in similar ways include Merlin Rabbit, who has made his way back into the meta with the fall of Sapphire Steel, as well as Merlin Goat, there to help you get closer to 20 lore, even if you lose board control. The utility of these characters helps you adapt to any situation. Protect your characters from actions with Pete, draw cards to find answers with Rabbit, and gain incremental lore with Goat. We've also included 2 copies of the library, a versatile location that not only provides synergistic card draw with your 1-cost characters, but is a good follow-up play to be prepared to apply a ton of pressure. Amethyst Steel also has an incredibly strong removal package. Elsa, the 5th Spirit, is a fantastic way to break stalled boards, exerting a chosen character when played. Peter Pan Shadowfinder also pairs with the evasive Genie Wish Fulfilled, but also the new Iago, turning this illusion into a 4/6 evasive with Rush. After that, the focus is on the Steelsongs. Strength of a Raging Fire takes advantage of your wide board to shoot down bigger targets, while Along Came Zeus is a multifunctional tool that can deal with both characters and locations. If you're expecting to see a lot of slower decks at your set championship, or simply prefer a more aggressive playstyle, the inclusion of Doc, Bold Knight, allows you to focus more on flooding the board and refilling your hand with his ability, rather than bouncing your rabbit. And because Doc lends himself to a more aggressive playstyle, there is a smaller emphasis on removal, so your 4 copies of Along Came Zeus can be replaced in favour of adding characters that can be played to the board. 1-cost Maleficent Biding Her Time is a good pick as well as a high lore early quester, and because of this more aggressive approach, you could also include Giant Cobra. Being able to gain 2 lore on play can help you cross the finish line even faster. Amethyst Steel has always been one of the more budget-friendly lists, especially if you avoid Doc. You can also replace Calhoun with another of Madam Mim Snake, trading a bit of board pressure in favour of a more budget option. The most costly card in this deck though is Strength of a Raging Fire. If you don't have these available, swap them out for Baboom. It's nowhere near as powerful, but gives you access to some inkable removal. You could also consider adding Let the Storm Rage On, although be sure to watch your uninkable count. Amethyst Steel has good matchups into Emerald Steel discard, where the efficient removal and card draw can negate their game plan, as well as against aggressive decks such as Amber Emerald, where your characters will often make favourable trades. It can struggle against Amber Steel Songs, which bypasses a lot of the deck's advantages if you aren't able to get Pete in play, and can be unfavoured as well against Amethyst Sapphire if you're unable to develop an early wide board. Next up, we're going to take a look at Amethyst Sapphire. This deck has really leapt in power with Archazia's Island to become one of the best decks. Amethyst Sapphire is another mid-range deck, but leverages Sapphire's ink accelerating abilities to get ahead of your opponent in ink, and then use this to your full advantage. Jumping ahead to 4 ink on turn 3 allows you to play characters like Genie Wish Fulfilled or Merlin Rabbit sooner than you'd be able to normally, and being able to get to the critical 7 ink for Amethyst means you can begin bouncing your focus characters with Madam Mim Fox sooner than any other Amethyst deck. And like Amethyst Steel, you'll look to make favourable trades with your well-statted characters, while still focusing on playing threats to the board rather than relying on removal actions. This in combination allows you to mitigate the inherent card disadvantage of Sapphire's ink acceleration by taking full advantage of Amethyst's card draw, and it means you'll always be playing from ahead. Amethyst also helps the overall consistency of the deck thanks to this card draw, but it does trade some of the power of other Sapphire ink pairings as a consequence. And although it has better tools to deal with it now, the deck can still struggle to deal with wide boards. Like Amethyst Steel, Amethyst Sapphire's core features the Bounce package, Madam Mim Foxes and Snakes, and Merlin Goats, along with the other Amethyst staples like Genie for aggression and Elsa for some control options. But rather than focusing on deploying multiple low-cost threats, the early game is instead dedicated to accelerating ink. This is achieved in the form of Tipo and Sail the Azurite Sea, both of which help you jump ahead in ink. One new tool in Amethyst Sapphire's kit is the addition of Belle, Apprentice Inventor. As a 3 strength, 3 willpower character, she will allow for favourable trades, but her ability to be played for free when banishing an item is what's critical here, which is why we've also included the Popsicle. Amethyst Sapphire's biggest weakness is whiteboards, but Belle helps deal with that somewhat, even if you don't have her in hand right away. A Popsicle on board represents a potential way to play her later, allowing you to play multiple characters in a single turn and combat opposing aggression. While you'll often be looking to control the board through positive trades, we've also included a full 4 copies of Hades' Infernal Schemer, a proven powerhouse in this deck that can help you deal with high willpower characters. He can also be bounced back to hand with a Mim to get repeated uses out of his ability. Similarly, Belle Accomplished Mystic is another removal option in this deck, especially given how much you'll be challenging other characters to control the board. If you're anticipating a control-heavy local meta, you can look into including cards like McDuck Mana, which will survive or be prepared, and is useful in other matchups too to apply lore pressure. Let It Go is a good option to include, especially if you're expecting Sapphire decks, as it, along with Hades, is a great way to deal with big bodies like Tamator Happy as a Clam or Maui Half Shark. And with the rise of illusion cards like Iago and Giant Cobra, you could include a couple of copies of Hypnotic Strength as a way to cleanly deal with them whilst also drawing cards. And if you're expecting discard, Finders Keepers is a great option that can't be swiped by Ursula Deceiver, and you'll often have plenty of ink in order to play it. Hades is the most expensive card in this deck, but can be replaced with Let It Go. It provides a similar, albeit less efficient, utility in the deck without breaking the bank. After that, Genie is the next most expensive card, and could be a good candidate to swap out for your preferred tech card, or even Merlin Rabbit, at the slight cost of weakening your lore pressure in the early game. In general, Amethyst Sapphire has a pretty good matchup spread. It has good matchups into Emerald Steel discard, where once again Amethyst's card draw power can negate discard's game plan. It can also do well against Ruby Amethyst, since it can access the powerful Amethyst card sooner. The deck does struggle against decks that go wide, and because of this, Amber Steelsong and Amber Emerald Chernadog can be tough matchups, though those have been improved slightly thanks to Belle. Okay, it's time for me to talk about my favourite deck in Disney Lorcana, Steelsong. Following the ban of Hiram Flavisham, which weakened Sapphire decks, Steelsong has really become one of the strongest and most played decks in the current format, and is perhaps as powerful as it's ever been. Steelsong's core gameplay remains unchanged, being an aggressive mid-range deck relying on singing to control the opponent's board, whilst developing its own. Cheating out songs sooner using Amber Singers continues to be a powerful and oppressive game plan, simply too much for many decks to deal with, and it has the potential to go wide with characters that many decks simply can't do. Because of this, Amber Steel is a great pick for fans of mid-range playstyles, being able to flex between the aggro and control role depending on the matchup. Amber Steel is also a straightforward deck, relying on a simple, consistent game plan of developing singers and removing threats in most games. But don't be fooled, altering decisions and sequencing are incredibly important, rewarding careful planning and strategic gameplay. And because of this, Steelsong can often beat itself with limited card draw available, and sometimes unplayable hands because of the high concentration of uninkable songs. Steelsong relies heavily on its singers to control the board in most matchups. Cinderella lets you cheat out 3-cost songs starting from turn 2. The Troubadour meanwhile is there to sing your 4-cost songs from turn 3. And Ariel continues to be the cornerstone of the deck. In almost every matchup, establishing these 3 singers will lock almost all other decks out of the game. We also include 1 copy of trusty Prince Naveen in our list, a great way to combat the on the draw disadvantage and help fight back in mirror matches. And while this early game plan of developing singers is true in most cases, against control decks such as Ruby Sapphire, you'll want to switch to full aggro. Daisy into Smee into Lawrence can often put enough lore pressure to close the game before they can stabilize. Card draw for Steelsong is largely through a well-timed Whole New World, best played when your hand is empty and your opponent's hand is full. But Rapunzel is your other main draw engine. Always be looking for an opportunity to get 3 damage on one of your characters to maximize her value. In terms of new cards with Archazia's Island, we've included Miss Bianca, Unwavering Agent, a 5/5 questing for 1 who can be played 2 turns early if you have an ally in play. And with the likes of Daisy Duck, Smee, Lawrence and the Troubadour, it shouldn't be an issue. And with Miss Bianca on board, you have another character who can sing Whole New World and isn't as easily removed. Steelsong is a fun deck because there are so many ways to build it. We showcased the Robin Hood build here, but if you're expecting a lot of control decks in your local meta, you could consider something a bit more aggressive. In those cases, remove the Robin Hood package and look to include cards like Penny, a good, aggressive character that can heal and protect your Smee, or make Daisy harder to remove. You can also increase your copies of Daisy to 4, and include some copies of Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain to add more lore pressure. The location, Neverland Mermaid Lagoon, provides an alternate way to generate lore that cannot be removed with Be Prepared or Big Sisu. If you're expecting more aggro decks, Cinderella Stout-Hearted could be replaced with Ariel's Sonic Warrior. Given Steelsong's power level, it's unsurprisingly one of the most expensive decks on our list, in large part due to Rapunzel. There's no perfect replacement for her unfortunately, though you could swap in Julieta Madrigal to make up the copies you're missing. The Queen package can also replace Robin Hood, offering a much cheaper alternative whilst maintaining much of the same game plan. Steelsong has a great matchup into a lot of decks in the current format, mainly decks like Amethyst Sapphire that can't deal with wide boards, or more aggro decks like Amethyst Emerald. While the matchup isn't half as bad as it used to be, Steelsong can still struggle against control decks like Ruby Sapphire, and Amber Emerald Chernadog can give it a hard time with all of its high willpower characters. Speaking of Chernadog, let's look at this Amber Emerald aggro list that has been seeing a lot of success. This is going to be a slightly modified version of Joel Shadeli's first place winning list at the 450 plus player tournament held last weekend, hosted by Ravensburger in Germany. Chernadog is an aggro list that excels at flooding the board with low cost characters to overwhelm opponents and can often close out the game with only a few turns. Draw discard effects will help you filter your deck for the answers you need. And once your discard pile has reached critical mass, you can deploy Chernadog as a game closer that many decks will struggle to deal with. Chernadog is an aggro deck that is often less fragile than those we've seen in the past, in large part due to a high concentration of high willpower characters that can withstand steel removal. It's a great pick if you enjoy a fast-paced playstyle that demands answers from your opponent. With draw discard effects, there's a lot of agency in this deck, allowing you to set up plays. It's also a real test of the fundamentals, knowing when to quest and when to sit tight. But while its high rolls are high, missing your key pieces can often see the deck simply fall apart, especially if you're not able to gain early momentum. This deck is built around a high number of low-cost characters, which allows you to develop an early, aggressive and wide board. Cards like Daisy Duck and Nala are great early threats, which often cannot be cleanly answered during the first few turns of the game. Developing a wide board early on is key to allow you to play your Tramp, Street Smart Dog, for as little ink as possible. Tramp is also essential to get out early, as he will allow you to filter through your deck more to find the pieces you need to close the game, while also filling your discard to enable an early Chernabog. And being able to get Chernabog into play as soon as possible will force your opponent to make difficult decisions, which will allow you to rush to victory. Tramp, Enterprising Dog, is a surprisingly strong card in this deck. His ability increases the strength of one of your chosen characters for each other character you have in play. This turns your often offensive questers into more defensive challengers. And once a high willpowered character has successfully taken out an opposing character, Rapunzel is there to heal them up and refill your hand. Creaky is another great defensive tool, helping you fight for board control when necessary, but he too also quests for 3. And in games where questing alone isn't enough to get you over the finish line, a well-timed Go-Go Tamago can net you a ton of lore to close out the game. Despite being one of the newer archetypes, Chernadog has a surprisingly solid core of cards to enable its game plan. Even so, you could certainly modify the deck to your liking. Piglet, Poo Pirate Captain, is always a great aggro card, and an excellent choice if you're expecting more Ruby than Steel in your local metagame. And since this deck is fully character based, Mufasa, Betrayed Leader could be a fun inclusion too, especially if you tune the deck to be more mid-range. The cost of this deck can be reduced significantly by simply replacing Rapunzel. While she is a fantastic draw engine, she also represents 80% of the total cost of this deck. Simply replacing her with Julieta Madrigal can make this deck significantly more budget friendly, though at the expense of consistency. As an aggro deck with a go-wide strategy, Chernadog has good matchups into decks such as Amethyst Sapphire, as well as slower decks like Ruby Amethyst. It can struggle more into decks like Amethyst Steel, which can shut down aggression from both challenging and songs, as well as Emerald Steel Discard, which can quickly whittle down resources. And if you're looking for some awesome products for your next set championship, be sure to check out the sponsor of today's video, HeavyPlay. HeavyPlay have their Equip Mag system, which allows you to connect your deck box to your dice box and your playmat, all with the power of magnets. It makes it super easy to switch between tables when playing. They also have their curved sleeves with curved corners. It makes shuffling a breeze and means you'll never have a card upside down in your deck again. If you want to get your hands on any HeavyPlay products before your next tournament, be sure to check them out at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 at checkout for 10% off your whole order. Our next deck is Ruby Amethyst, another deck that has benefited from the Hiram ban, but has also evolved along with the current metagame. Ruby Amethyst is a mid-range deck that edges a bit more in the control direction. The deck focus is to keep your opponent's board clear, drawing cards along the way to further push your card advantage. Once you're able to stabilize and have control of the board, it's then time to close out the game with Maui Halfshark, leveraging his lore gaining abilities to quickly cross the finish line. And if things get out of hand, playing Be Prepared can reset the board, and you can follow up with cards that will outvalue your opponents. Ruby Amethyst is a great pick if you enjoy a consistent mid-range deck that has a good matchup spread and some fun new tools to play with. Combining the card draw and consistency of Amethyst with the removal and strength of Ruby means that this deck remains one of the strongest in Disney Lorcana. It's a very forgiving deck that doesn't punish mistakes as harshly as some others do, but it's also a deck that can punish your opponent's mistakes. Though powerful, it's a deck that doesn't have any easy matchup, instead having even matchups across the board. The early game of Ruby Amethyst will be focused around control and card draw. The one-cost characters in Diablo and Chernadog's followers both replace themselves in one way or another, helping you maintain card advantage. Diablo in particular can be combined with Merlin Crab to help deal with early threats. Taking advantage of powerful evasive characters, Peter Pan Shadowfinder is a great turn 3 player that can deal with threats, but also allow you to rush out Iago on turn 4. Moving into the mid game, you can continue to control the board with tools like Maui, Hero to Wall, and Lady Tremaine. And Be Prepared is there in case of emergencies. We've included one copy of Maui's Fishhook in the deck too, to help deal with opposing evasive threats, or to power up your characters. It also has amazing synergy with Peter Pan, as you can give a freshly played character evasive with Fishhook, which will in turn give them rush thanks to Peter Pan. And once you've got everything under control, Maui Halfshark is your win condition, recurring actions and gaining a lore for each one played. With Peter Pan on board, he can also become a rush character, delivering immediate value. Because Ruby Amethyst can be a little slow, and opponents can sometimes get dangerously close to winning by the mid-game, you can use a Pirate's Life to slow them down, whilst edging yourself closer to victory. If you're expecting a lot of aggressive or discard decks, Sisu Emboldened Warrior and Sisu Empowered Sibling could be good cards to include, replacing some copies of Be Prepared, and lowering your count of Peter Pan, Shadowfinder and Elsa. This means you'll have access to a board wipe that also develops your board. King Undisputed is a good pick if you're expecting a lot of Sapphire, while also synergizing well with Maui Halfshark. The 2-cost slot is also quite flexible. While we've included Lumiere to help in Ruby matchups, and Pegasus because of his synergy with Peter Pan, the Queen of Hearts losing her temper is a good alternative if you're expecting a lot of Steel decks. Aside from Maui Halfshark, the deck is surprisingly budget friendly. If you enjoy the lore gaining playstyle, Ratigan Nefarious Criminal provides a similar effect to Maui, though far less powerful. You could also reduce the lore gaining altogether and remove the need for Maui. Instead, replace him and a Pirate's Life with more copies of the Library and the Queen's Castle for a 2-pronged approach to lore gain and putting pressure on your opponent. Ruby Amethyst doesn't have any polarizing matchups, though it is often favoured into the likes of Amethyst Emerald and Ruby Sapphire. It can have a harder time into decks like Amber Steel and their wide boards, as well as Amethyst Steel if they're able to have a good start. Ruby Sapphire has gone through quite the journey this set, and the current quote-unquote best version plays as a lore gaining deck. We'll be showcasing this list from DKP, winner of the Disney Lorcana Challenge, Melbourne. The game plan here is leveraging Maui Halfshark, along with the Pirate's Life to grind towards 20 lore, while using Ruby's suite of efficient removal to make sure your opponent can't keep up, and the pairing of Sapphire allows you to do this much faster and more efficiently than other similar decks. Aside from lore gaining across actions, this deck also has access to McDuck mana, and this becomes a secondary win condition, providing a formidable lore threat that is not so easily removed. Ruby Sapphire is a powerful deck that rewards patience and always working towards setting up board states your opponent can't answer. Sapphire's deck filtering and inking actions provide an unrivaled amount of agency and micro decision making, which can help you find your answers. And gaining access to Ruby removal faster due to Sapphire gives it a good matchup into mid-range decks, especially those with lower strength characters. But the deck is slower, and aggro decks can often close games before Ruby Sapphire is able to stabilize the board. The first turns for Ruby Sapphire will be based around accelerating your ring to get to your late game. As such, Tipo and Sail the Azurite Sea are critical to play on turn 2. Because of this, Popsicle and Develop Your Brain are there to help you find them if you don't have them in your opening hand. After that, How Far I'll Go helps you get to your critical 6 ink even sooner, allowing you to deploy Maui Halfshark. Maui alone will often stall out games as your opponents will avoid questing to deny you value from him. But with Maui on board, you can begin taking advantage of his wayfinding ability, paired with removal and ink accelerating actions to apply significant pressure. And with Maui on board, a Pirate's Life becomes a 5 lore swing in your favour, which can set back even the most aggressive of decks. You should also look to establish a McDuck mana at an opportune time, as this will push you even closer to victory. If you need to reset the board with Be Prepared, this can be a good follow-up as there are few answers in the game to deal with a 9 willpower location. And more removal comes in the form of Sisu and Powered Sibling. While the deck doesn't run any strength reducing abilities, there are still many good targets and you'll be able to play Sisu pretty quickly in this deck. DKP's list is a well-oiled machine from one of the best players in the game, but still, this list can be adapted to your local meta. If you're expecting a lot of aggro decks at your store, Super Goof is a good option to include that fits nicely into the core game plan of this deck. Hades' Infernal Schema is also a card finding its way into these lists, especially if you're expecting opposing Sapphire decks. You could also include Cusco's Selfish Emperor to help deal with locations and items. And if you're expecting a lot of discard decks, All Is Found is a great way to accelerate your ink without sacrificing your card advantage. There's no getting around this one. With Maui Halfshark, Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, and Sisu and Powered Sibling, this is an expensive list without many budget replacements. But if you really have your heart set on playing Ruby Sapphire, you could consider building around a card like Belle Mechanic Extraordinaire, adding in Belle Apprentice Inventor and items like Vitalosphere to power her up, and include Tamatoa So Shiny to synergize with these extra items. Ruby Sapphire has good matchups into deck like Steelsong, so is a great pick if you're expecting a lot of it. It also has a reasonable matchup into Amethyst Sapphire. The deck will struggle into faster lists though, such as a more aggressively tuned Amethyst Steel, or a deck like Amber Emerald Chernadog. Another deck that is thriving in the post-Hiro meta is Emerald Steel Discard, the final deck on our list. This is a deck that looks to control your opponent through two methods, both on the board, but also restricting their resources through discarding. Because of that, the playstyle of this deck is about using Steelsongs to remove opposing threats, while simultaneously finding opportunities to force discard. And the tension this deck creates for your opponent can force them to make errors, especially since they will have to make constant decisions about when to play cards, when to hold back, and what to discard. Emerald Steel Discard is a great pick if you prefer a playstyle that challenges your opponent's board and their hand. It also has some of the biggest high roll potentials in the game, thanks to the presence of Diablo Devoted Herald. And this can lead to some of the most incredibly one-sided matchups, as this deck snowballs to victory. However, the deck can lose a lot of momentum if you're not able to find the key pieces. And most decks will come well prepared with multiple answers to the core strategy of this deck, with a bevy of cards all there to deal with Diablo. The list we're looking at here is similar to Sailor's winning Emerald Steel list. Diablo, Maleficent and Spy is a great way to scope ahead and figure out what your opponent has in hand. If you see songs, Ursula on 2 helps remove potential answers, especially if you're looking to play out Diablo Devoted Herald. It's often been said that for each turn Diablo goes unanswered, your chances of winning increase exponentially, so protecting him is important, and is the reason this deck includes Hidden Cove. After that, much of the early game will be about establishing Ursula Deceiver of All and using her to control the board from there. The Muses, Proclaimers of Heroes, can help your removal become even more useful, especially against decks featuring low willpower characters. The other part of the strategy is discard. Ursula helps here too, as a double sudden chill can be devastating for almost every deck in the game. But by pairing these discard actions with Prince John Greediest of All, discard becomes a secondary draw engine, and his ward mean there are few answers available. The deck also has other tools to prevent your opponent from getting back in the game, with Pete, Games Referee, preventing actions and continuing to protect your characters. And he also provides the perfect shift target for the new Pete Space Pirate, who adds further disruption, preventing opposing characters from singing songs, and a threat that's just difficult to remove in his own right. Like many of the decks we're featuring today, Emerald Steel Discard is a list that has been developed and iterated on over time to form its core. That being said, if you're worried about the slowness of this version, Cursed Merfolk, Ursula's Handiwork are a great early aggro threat that also further your discard strategy. They can also be paired with Smee Bumbling Mate, who remains a solid turn 2 play. Pluto Guard Dog is a good option as well to protect your characters, and once damaged, he can be returned to hand with the Muses to heal him up and replay him again at full health afterwards. To reduce the cost of the deck without weakening the core strategy, replacing Diablo Devoted Herald is about the best option, although this will reduce the strength of the deck significantly. Donald Duck, Perfect Gentleman, can provide a similar card draw effect, and although he will let your opponent draw cards, this can often work in your favour to power up Prince John. And Beast Tragic Hero could be replaced with the less costly Clarabelle Light on her hooves. Emerald Steel Discard historically has a good matchup into Ruby Amethyst, and can do well against low willpower aggro decks like Amber Amethyst. It can struggle against Ruby Sapphire since a board wipe like Be Prepared or Sisu can be difficult to recover from, as well as Amethyst Steel, whose card draw and removal can be problematic. And that's our 7 suggestions for decks you could bring to the Archazia's Island Set Championship. And if you found it useful, be sure to hit the like button on your way out as it does help, and subscribe as we'll have plenty of content moving into reveal season for the Reign of Jafar. And thanks again to the sponsor of this video, Heavy Play. Remember, if you want to get your hands on any Heavy Play products, be sure to visit them at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 at checkout for 10% off. And of course, as always, thanks to our YouTube members. We appreciate your support so much. If you want to become a member or just find out more, you can hit the join button down below. Until then, best of luck getting your hands on that hero promo card, and of course, happy questing.